Hi everyone, I'm Ondine if you haven't been here before, and welcome back if you have. Today we're talking how to do a Vinyasa flow, and by Vinyasa flow I'm referring to the down dog, plank, chaturanga, cobra, up dog, down dog flow sequence. In my 20 years of teaching, this is the sequence I see people struggle with the most. So let's get some clarity around what the hell you need to do to feel more flow and ease in this sequence. So let's get started in downward dog. First things first, let's talk hand position. You want to spread open through your fingers. Make sure the middle finger is facing forward and you're applying pressure right down into the palms of the hands and the backs of the knuckles. So often I see people rolling the weight onto the little finger and cupping the hands. You really destabilize the position like this. So push firmly through the hands. Make sure the creases of the wrists are parallel to the front of your mat, and then strong arms are pressing back. As your arms stay strong, you'll take your sit bones high to the sky. Now, if you're feeling a lot of tightness in the hamstrings, unlock your knees, bend them a little bit, and this will create space. Notice the space that opens up in the lower back for you to be able to rotate your pelvis upward, taking your sit bones high to the sky. This is called anterior pelvic tilt. And then you're just going to gently press the heels down toward the floor. The goal of your down dog is not to get the heels to the floor. It's to create a beautiful spinal extension. The head will rest right between the arms. So you don't want to drop it too low or have your chin reaching forward and the head lifting up. So just neutralizing the neck, keeping the neck and the spine in alignment. Now, the other thing with your down dog I often see is that people have a really short stance through their down dog. And this is because they feel they need to get the heels to the floor. And that's not the case at all. And what this does is round the spine and create a posterior tilt through the pelvis, which is not what we want. So create some length between the hands and the feet. A lot of spaciousness will then open up for you to extend the spine. So try taking your feet a little bit further back behind you. Now from here, we're going to float forward into a plank. So breathe in and start to bring your shoulders right over your wrists. You'll notice I haven't moved my hands or my feet. Now, a few things to really note here. To help support the lower back, you want to pull your belly button up towards your spine so your abdominal muscles engage. Keep the chin tucked down towards the chest. It's the crown of the head that extends forward so that your neck is a natural continuation of your spine. Here as well, your hands are pushing down into the floor because your arms are creating the pillars which are the foundation of your strength here. Activate your legs. The way you activate your legs is to pull your kneecaps up towards you, which will activate your quad muscles. And then look at my feet here. All 10 toes pressing into the floor, and my heels are sitting just above the mounds of the feet. Now, this is really important that the legs are engaged because the engagement of the legs is what's going to help you carry your pose down to the floor in chaturanga. And what I often see in plank position is that people come so far forward onto the tips of their toes that they start to bring the shoulders over the wrists. And then when they want to bend down into chaturanga, they kind of lose control and collapse down to the floor. Remember that your toes are acting like little roots of a tree, and obviously the roots of a tree stabilize the tree. And this is a little bit the same here. So all 10 toes push down into the floor. We're going to take a deep breath in and start to move down into chaturanga. Now, really important here is the angle of where your elbows go. So instead of opening the elbows out to the side, which means your bones start to misalign, and then you've got a lot of weakness happening through the body, and you're going to collapse down.
So what you want to do is keep the bones stacked. So the shoulder joint over the elbow joint over the wrist joint. And then as you bend the elbows, they go back behind you. Imagine ski pole arms. If you were skiing, you'd be pulling your elbows back, right? I'm actually not a skier, but that's what I've seen. So hopefully that's correct. If anyone's a skier out there, you can let me know. Take a deep breath in. On the breath out, elbows pull back behind you. Start to lower the chest down between the hands, and you're just shaving the sides of your body with your elbows. Once your chest finds the floor, untuck your toes, let your head rest on the floor, and we want to find a 90-degree angle through our arms. So I like to slide my hands back a little bit, and you'll notice now my arms are at 90 degrees. I'm going to pull my elbows into the midline. So the elbows squeeze in towards my body and are pulling back to the wall behind me. Forehead on the floor. Now, I'm going to come back up to show you another version of coming down into chaturanga. If that feels like there's too much pressure or weight for you to carry your body down, there's a lot of upper body strength that's required for chaturanga. So notice that my shoulders are stacked over my elbows, over my wrists. I'm going to take a deep breath in, and on the breath out, keep the plank position, but just bend the knees to the floor. And then you don't have the weight of your legs that you need to carry down. What I see a lot also is that once people place their knees on the ground, they start to pull their upper body back, bend the elbows, and kind of curl down to the floor. So what you want to do is keep that forward motion, bend the elbows in the same way that you would if your legs were straight, and then take the chest down between the hands. And then you don't need to move any part of your body. Untuck the toes, forehead to the floor, and we're going to slide the hands back just a little bit to notice that 90-degree angle through the arms. Now, the other thing that I see a lot is when people come down to the floor, their hands are sometimes way out in front here. And notice that when I slide my hands out in front, my elbows start to pivot open. And then from here, when I try to push up into a cobra, I've got no strength, my elbows are pulling out to the side, I've lost the alignment of my shoulder, wrist, and elbow. And then what happens is they push up, they crunch through the neck and the shoulders, and then kind of make their way up somehow, right? So 90-degree angle through the arms, forehead to the floor. And let's move into our chaturanga. Now press the backs of your feet firmly into the floor, because when you use all 10 toes to push down the tops of the feet, that will be traction to help you lift the chest. So pull the elbows into the spine. Inhale, lift the head and the heart. And already at this point, you're probably feeling your back extensors engage. And then exhalation, you can continue to press up and back into your downward facing dog. We'll look at doing an upward facing dog in a moment, but there's something that I'd like to mention here. A lot of times I also see people doing this. Cobra, and lifting their head and lifting the chin and looking up to the sky, which means you're overextending through your neck and cutting off the circulation to the back of your neck. Plus, another fun fact, when you look at a cobra rise up to strike, it is not taking its head back. It's actually looking forward. Case in point. So what we want to do when we push up into our cobra is to inhale and keep the head neutral. And what does that mean? That your spine and neck are naturally aligned, which is exactly what we want. And then exhale, come down. Good. So if we were to look at that upward facing dog, so the difference between a cobra and an upward facing dog is the following. In an upward facing dog, you're actually lifting your knees and your legs off the floor. So let me demonstrate. If I come from a plank, I'm going to breathe in here, and on the breath out, bending the elbows, lowering all the way down. I'm actually not going to lower my body to the floor. I'm going to flip over my toes, and you'll notice that my knees and my hips are off the floor. Pull my shoulder heads back, lift my heart forward, my head facing forward, all 10 toes pressing into the floor. And then I'm going to lift up, roll over my toes, and press back into my downward facing dog. Now, if you're a beginner, I don't recommend that you do this because the tendency is to crunch the shoulders up towards the ears and create a lot of tension in the upper body, and that's not what we want. It's also a very deep back bend, so it takes time to build up the strength to push your upper body through and also to create the space in the lower back. Right? So if an upward facing dog is something that you would like to work on, the rolling of the toes sometimes freaks people out. And so what I recommend that you do is that when you're in a downward facing dog, you can just bring your feet together, hold your downward facing dog by flipping your toes over, and work at strengthening the toes, stretching the toes, and the front of the foot. And you can also bend your knees a little bit here to apply a bit more weight, taking the tailbone back, and flipping the toes back again. Finally, we want to be really aware of using the breath to help support us in this sequence. So let me talk you through how the breath flows with the movement. The synchronicity of breath and movement is super important. As I mentioned, the breath supports each movement. So when you're in your downward facing dog, you'll breathe into your plank. On the exhalation, you'll drop down to chaturanga. Untuck the toes, forehead to the floor, hands can roll back a little bit. Inhale, cobra, or your upward dog, and then exhale up and back into your downward facing dog. So one of the things I really recommend you do in this vinyasa sequence is to slow it right down. Oftentimes I see people flying through the sequence, and when they do that, they often lose control of their breath or they lose awareness of the breath. And when you're moving that quickly, often it's very difficult to control the weight of the body or control the strength required to articulate the pose in movement. So I really recommend that you slow it down and you break it up into sections. So often I practice a downward facing dog to a plank, back to a downward facing dog, and then repeat several times until I feel really comfortable. And then you could start from a plank and drop down to a chaturanga, come back up again and drop down several times, and then link those three movements: downward dog, plank, chaturanga. Come back, downward dog, plank, chaturanga, and then slowly link them all together so that your body can get used to the movements. You can also be really aware of the breath, and if you slow everything down, you'll feel it a lot more in your body and which parts of the body are feeling more challenged, and those are the parts of the body that we'll work on separately to build more strength. So this is not an easy sequence. I know it's very ubiquitous in most yogic classes, it's everywhere. But in my opinion, it's one of the hardest sequences that there is out there in the yoga repertoire. It takes time to build upper body strength. It takes time to develop the arm muscles, the legs, the core. So keep going, don't give up, you've got this. I hope these tips were helpful. Feel free to ask me any questions in the comments box below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.